Welcome back to SoberKart. So, Nintendo changed the online voting system in Mario Kart World. Now, instead of choosing between 3 intermissions and 1 random option that used to give us a 3-lap trap, the random option now also is usually an intermission. Look, I'm personally not the biggest fan of how most of the intermission tracks are handled in this game. They are often too straight, too empty, and they just turn competitive racing into an item roulette. But I've also been racing every single one of these routes in both directions, and I've got to admit something. There are actually some really solid intermission routes in this game. Like tracks that can hold their own weight from a competitive perspective. Routes where front running is actually viable, shortcuts matter, and bagging actually isn't the only play. In today's video, I'm sharing 14 intermission tracks along with a few honorable mentions, and in some cases they're reverse options too, that I think are worth picking, not just tolerable, but legitimately fun, strategic, and better than the bottom 3 full tracks in this game. I won't go over my full list today, but spoiler alert, Koopa Troopa Beach is in that list. So let's face it, with how this update changed random selection, we are all going to be seeing a lot more of these routes online, so instead of suffering through it, let's talk about which ones are actually good. Where to find shortcuts, what makes them shine, and how to shake up the current bag and pray strategy that often takes over online. I'm not fully finished racing all of the 269 route combinations, but once I do, I'll be putting together a full intermission tier list and ranking every single one, forward and backwards. But for now, there will be some missing that will probably be added to the great list. So hit that like button if you're tired of hallway tracks, and let's get into the intermissions that actually are pretty cool. In no particular order, first up is Acorn Heights to Boo Cinema. Both routes are actually pretty fun, but going to Boo Cinema is overall better in my opinion. Leaving Acorn Heights, going downhill into a curvy section where there are small shroom cuts that don't take more than 1 to pull off, an overall windy route in the middle, and finishing on the Ghost Valley options that honestly should have been tracks themselves, with twisted turns and areas to easily get bumped off and require precision drifting if you want to race optimally. And next is Choco Mountain to Toad's Factory. Again, both of these are fun, but heading to Toad's Factory is just overall better. This one is great because you start out racing a decent portion of Choco Mountain's normal track layout. There is one straight area right after that, but doesn't last too long. The overall in-between section is pretty short with minimal straight lines and a valley section that allows for optimal lines for those who know where to race. You can often avoid the pack if you choose to front run this area, and it does not take very long before the final turn that takes you over this bridge right into Toad's Factory. Moving on to Cheep Cheep Falls to Dandelion Depths, no matter which route you choose, moving either direction, they are pretty different from each other, with one taking a water route heading into Cheep Cheep Falls, and the other a windy road path. The road path has some NPC vehicles and enemies to avoid, and the water layout heading to Cheep Cheep Falls has plenty of trick sections that allow for skill expression to give you an edge. They aren't my favorite routes on this list, but still are better than Koopa Beach, or Troopa Beach, whatever. Next up is Acorn Heights to Dry Bones Burnout. Leaving Acorn Heights, you already have a few path options to choose from as you climb down from the tree, racing a section of the normal track layout backwards, following it up with some more of the windy roads within the intermissions overall that still have enemies to avoid. There are some shroom cuts here, but none that are honestly large enough to give the golden mushroom holders a major advantage over those just holding one. Pretty short and jumps into dry bones pretty quickly. Anyone using their shrooms to cut off the intermission won't end up having them for the final stretch of this section within the track, which makes it overall pretty even in my opinion. Moving into Dandelion Depths from Acorn Heights, this is one of the more straighter ones on this list of fun tracks, but the reason it is here is because it requires the knowledge of how water mechanics work in this game. First off, there are so many rocks down the river that you can race on here that can be used to not only get a trick off, but then a double trick from coming out of the water. That, combined with an overall timing of when to trick here, can allow for front runners to pull ahead and ends up entering a side entrance to the cavern within Dandelion Depths, which is overall just a beautiful sight, and almost racing the track a lap and a half over the normal one-lap ending like in most intermissions. And then we have Bowser's Castle to Airship Fortress. Both directions could make it on the list of intermissions worth picking, but heading to Airship Fortress, in my opinion, is significantly better. Leaving Bowser's Castle is already a sight in itself, and when you go back to Bowser's Castle, you have to climb up the volcano, which gets kind of boring and redundant. There's plenty of tricks right out the gate, and then riding on the castle wall for a brief time that could arguably use more enemies, but the time spent here isn't much at all, and there are not really any areas where multiple mushrooms can cut off a large portion of the track. Overall, it's pretty tight and gets into Airship fairly quickly. That allows you to jump right onto the rail shortcuts that are some of the easier, yet more fun ones to get down in this game. Boo Cinema to Drybone's Burnout, and equally reversing that order makes the list even though they have some of the longer in-between routes. Racing on these Ghost Valley tracks almost make it worth it in itself. They are twisty and can be used to bump people off around tight corners. There is a narrow bridge right after this that, with the right angle, can be used to save a little time if you get up on the upper ropes. And the split bridge section right after that is windy as well, where you can fall off. Overall, there are plenty of things to do on these routes other than just driving straight. The scenery is obviously great as well, but that's not how I'm ranking these. Even though both routes are nearly identical, just in reverse order, I think I just prefer ending on Drybone's Burnout over Boo Cinema, but that's just a personal take. Now for Choco Mountain to Mario Bros. Circuit. This one is overall pretty tight. Leaving Choco Mountain is already a good start for most intermission routes. Getting to race on half of the Choco Island tracks are a throwback that I personally enjoy a lot. There are also separate electrical lines to grind on that can not only save you some time, but separate you from the pack a bit so you can get away from much of the chaos. Watch out for shells here because they do follow the power lines if thrown on them, but for now, I don't think too many people even notice these, and I am almost always the only one taking these routes. And then to finish it off, we get to race Mario Bros. Circuit backwards, which is honestly a breath of fresh air in itself. I haven't fully mastered these shortcuts in reverse yet, but it's nice to know it's an option. And then on to Moo Moo Meadows to Choco Mountain. I prefer this route because we get to end on Choco Mountain, but either way, it's practically the same route. Again, there are multiple power lines that allow for separation and a good amount of enemies and vehicles to dodge. Just like the last one, we also get to race on the Choco Island tracks and race more than just a full lap of Choco Mountain at the end, which is always nice. Now for Choco Mountain to and from Wario Stadium. Both of these routes are already fun as it is, with plenty of twisted roads that allow for almost constant drifting that is actually viable. There's also plenty of grind rail sections and trick sections that make front running a little bit more viable as well. If Nintendo were to just add some more enemies on these routes, these would be amazing options. But to be honest, that's kind of the theme for most of these intermissions, isn't it? Ending this off, no matter which direction you are going, you get to race more than just one full lap of the ending track. which again, for me, allows for it to make the list because they are closer to what people typically have been enjoying, at least from what I've seen online. We have another Choco Mountain intermission. Heading to or from Whistle Stop Summit, I don't know what it is about the roads surrounding Choco Mountain, but they seem to consistently make for some better intermission routes. These are some of the longer routes that made my list, but it's mostly due to them being pretty unique. The obvious turns and enemies that I require, but to top it off, this route has a tornado that you can drive into and glide over the straightest section of the track. And let me tell you, this allows for some strategy because if you get hit by a shell in this section, you not only fall to the ground, but will usually be in the middle of the off-road, taking you forever to get back onto the actual track. If people played this route strategically, many individuals' races could be completely ruined right here in this section alone. Now we have a track that ends on Moo Moo Meadows coming from Cheep Cheep Falls. The most boring part of this intermission is right in the beginning, which helps it a lot. We then move into this windy hill that zigzags back and forth to the mountain outside of Cheep Cheep Falls. Moving from there, we can find one of the longest power lines that you can grind on in the game that is also faster than just driving the normal route. This could potentially allow for separation for front runners, but also skips a good section. And to finish it off, not only do we get to race more than a full lap of Moo Moo Meadows, we get to race it backwards, which again is always a nice breath of fresh air. I wonder what people will end up finding on this track taking this backwards route. Moving on to Cheep Cheep Falls to Salty Salty Speedway. What I found most interesting about this route is for over half of the entire thing, the road that you race on is parallel to a river that could also be chosen to race on instead. Combine that with how both of these tracks are mostly water tracks, I'm interested to see how certain character combinations can gain a significant advantage here due to hidden water speed stats. Regardless, heading into Salty Salty Speedway is a fun change of pace and almost race a half a lap before starting the final one, which again allows for this to not be a cringe intermission overall. Both routes are viable, but I personally found heading to Salty Salty Speedway to be a bit more fun. There's not too much to go off in the beginning though. Now for Crown City to DK Spaceport. Again, both of these routes are fun in their own way and slightly different routes. But I'm personally a huge fan of this version of Crown City that we get to finish on. Not only driving backwards on what would be the normal track, but there are also different routes that completely change up how Crown City is played. I almost wish this variant was the normal Crown City, jumping from different rooftops that aren't accessible in the normal version, and to finishing it off with a shroom cut that can be used to probably skip a bunch of placements. Alright, before we wrap this up, I would like to include a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut, but can still be chosen if there are no better options, starting with Choco Mountain to Shy Guy Bazaar. It has plenty of shroom cuts and can be pretty fun, but it's still pretty bagging heavy for now. Airship Fortress to Shy Guy Bazaar also allows for you to race an entirely different variant of the track, driving through Daisy's Palace, that in my opinion should have been a 3-lap track in itself. Wario Shipyard to Cheep Cheep Falls is another water-heavy one that is pretty fun if you know the mechanics well, and you get to drive backwards on part of the shipyard track. And from Crown City to Desert Hills, it isn't too bad, and you get to race Desert Hills backwards as well. What tracks did I not include in this list that you think deserve a mention? As I said, I have not finished racing every single one quite yet, but with the recent update, I felt like this would be a good video to get out now, to hopefully ease some of the pain. I personally think Nintendo messed up pretty big here, and should fix this as soon as possible, but for now, maybe we can work together on creating a list of the best intermission routes this game has to offer, and keep the worldwides great like they already were. Thanks again for watching till the end if you did, and subscribe for more Mario Kart World deep dives, rankings, shortcuts, and fun. Let's go.